folks, we are back, and we are joined by Rosalind Peterson of CaliforniaSkywatch.com. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on your show this evening.
Well, not a problem. We had her on the Alex Jones show last summer, and she made a big splash. So why don't you give people a little bio about yourself and how you started the site, CaliforniaSkywatch.com?
I used to work for the United States Department of Agriculture, California Division Farm Service Agency. And I worked for 3 county offices for a period of time and also became a certified agriculture crop loss adjuster. And I used to travel about 50,000 miles a year addressing crop losses in the state of California. And then I have also worked for the Mendocino County Probation Department, the Mendocino County Department of Agriculture, as in other words, I was looking at different types of pests, and I was an agricultural technologist and traveled around the county here in Mendocino, California, where I live, addressing pest issues and other issues about agricultural crops like trees and apple trees, things like that. So that's what I did for a long period of time. So in 2002, I became interested in the phenomenon of persistent jet contrails, and I didn't know anything about them particularly, except that I remembered that I used to get irritated because our skies would turn into kind of a white haze. And then things got worse in 2002, so I decided that this wasn't normal. So I put up the California Skywatch website shortly after I started investigating to put findings and different information up. And since that time, I've spent a good deal of time looking at government atmospheric programs that are ongoing, and my concerns about the toxic chemicals that they use in those programs, my concerns about geoengineering schemes to put particles in the air or chemicals in order to reduce global warming. So there was a whole series of articles that I wrote for newswithviews.com summarizing my interest in these issues and also putting documents up online so that people could see which programs these were and take a look at the actual documents for themselves.
And then through these op-ed pieces that you'd write for News with Views, is that how you got on NBC News and then later into this Discovery Channel program?
It was those articles, and also a group of us had a demonstration in Los Angeles with regard to bringing attention to these jet contrails. And then it was accidental, actually, that NBC News in Burbank, California, actually someone called them and told them about me, and that's how they came to interview me twice on Toxic Skies for their program about experimental weather modification bills that Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison had introduced as legislation, where the plan is to modify your weather without your consent or to mitigate your weather without your consent, oversight, or any prior public notification. And so it's like her bill, which she just introduced on March 16th of this year, U.S. Senate Bill 601. We're going to stand and fight off that bill again this year because there's no public oversight and there will be no public notification, but they will be allowed, the government agencies will be allowed to modify or mitigate your weather without public consent. So that's how I got involved in that arena as well.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about some of these agencies and some of these programs that they have that are already on the books. I mean, what is out there publicly that's going on with our skies?
Well, publicly, NASA and the U.S. Air Force are doing atmospheric heating and testing programs, which means that they send up canisters, either on the space shuttle or on rockets, and these canisters are loaded with chemicals like barium, aluminum, strontium, SF6, sulfur hexafluoride. There's a lot of toxic chemicals in this mix, and what they do is when they're superheated, they explode, and they conduct atmospheric and ionospheric experiments. But the problem is that those chemicals are starting to come down to Earth and show up in our drinking water supplies as spikes. And so these programs carried on in Alaska and across the United States. There's one program that uses trimethyl aluminum, which is highly toxic to marine life and aquatic life and water supplies. And that's conducted over the continental United States. And the University of Alaska is involved. Besides NASA and the Air Force, several universities are involved in these projects as well. But what happens is that no one tells the public, and it's not really reported widely in the press, that these experiments are going on and that the effect that they could have on this fragile cocoon that we live in that provides us life here on Earth. So that's one of my concerns. The other programs, right now, anyone can modify your weather without your consent. Any private individual, any corporation, any city, any state, any county, the military, NASA, a university, anyone. And they can modify your weather not only without your consent or notification, but they can modify your weather using any type of chemical, any method of dispersion that they want. There's a lot of weather modification companies that not only modify the weather in the United States, but around the world as well. So the weather we're seeing here in the United States is critically impacted by the number and scope of the programs within the United States. And the United States Department of Commerce lists about 60 of those ongoing programs that are growing each year in number and in scope and the number of square miles they can cover under one such program. And so this is having, I think, a profound effect in putting certain areas into flood conditions, other areas into drought conditions, because once they initiate a program like this, they can't always control the end result. And so you can have unintended consequences, too much rain, for example, so you get flooding. So the people of the United States are really not aware, because it's never discussed, that there are all of these weather modification programs ongoing that really change our climate. And my concern is not only the climate change, but that it disrupts agriculture crop production, because then you either have drought conditions or too much rain, which causes a lowering of crop production where these programs are being initiated. Even the Texas farmers in the Panhandle have objected for the last few years because weather modification has not allowed them to have the normal rainfall that they would normally get for the grass to grow, for their cattle to eat. And when these programs are initiated, they don't get enough rain. It gets too spread out. And so therefore their aquifers and the ground doesn't get enough rain to support the cattle. And it means they go out of business, or they have to buy the feed from somewhere else, which is way too expensive.
And, with these programs, where is their oversight? I mean, do they even say that there's any oversight over these programs? Or, are we just supposed to trust these organizations?
We're supposed to trust these organizations that they know what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And for example, in California, there's over 30 weather modification programs ongoing right now, new ones being introduced each year. And a lot of times you're going to put more water or snow in one location, and you're going to put an agricultural area into complete drought. So it makes the farmers have to buy water if it's available, or it can make water shortages so we don't have enough water or snow in the snowpacks. So these can have very definite effects, and as your weather moves across the United States, you've got Idaho, you've got Wyoming, you've got Colorado, you've got all these states modifying the weather as you move east. And every time that you modify the weather somewhere, you have another effect. Mm-hmm. So increasing the snowpack in Wyoming puts Colorado into drought conditions, and surrounding counties. So people don't see the connection because they don't even know that all these programs exist. And where you are in Texas, they have a Texas regulatory authority in Texas. They can't do any oversight over federal programs, but they do some oversight over state programs. And you have extensive weather modification, which puts some of the areas of Texas into drought conditions and other areas with too much rainfall. And I really think that that even though there's a regulatory body, that they pretty well let the private entities do what they want as far as putting water in one place and taking it away from some other place. So it's interesting.
Yeah, well, as you pointed out, I mean, most people don't even know that weather modification is going on. In fact, you walk up to the average person and say they're modifying the weather, and they call you a kook. We'll be back after this with Rosalind Peterson, CaliforniaSkywatch.com.